Mr. Sullivan?
How are you today, Mr. Jackson?
Well, I am being joyful about my procrastination. How are you?
Well, I'm feeling the same way. I was reviewing the 18 months that we've been talking about procrastination, and one of the things that occurs to me that we've both been benefiting each in our own way, and I think there's been some common territory that we both discovered. It has struck me that we may be the first two people in human history actually having this discussion.
That may be. It's so good. And it's true.
Yeah, no, because I've never, I've read a lot of philosophers, and none of them have talked about this. I had the benefit of going to, the great books college, St. John's, and we read pretty well most of the key books of Western history, and not once did the topic ever come up, and not once did people ever talk about talking to someone else about this phenomenon of procrastination. So it just occurred to me as I was reviewing my thoughts before, locking into the podcast today, that this may be the first time that two people have actually talked about this, and certainly in such a focused and systematic way.
I'm turning it into a superpower, using it as raw material. I wonder what the actual root of the word procrastination, where that first became popularized, and what was the time period that procrastination became a recognizable thing.
Well, I can do this in one of two ways. I can look it up right now. And I have the
Wikipedia page of this.
No, I have the English, the big Oxford English Dictionary. I've got
that's your,
pardon me.
capital.
I just had to sneeze, but I have 20 volumes here behind me. This is the biggest English dictionary in the world. This was given to me. My staff one, because it's the gift you give to someone who you don't know what to give to them. So you give them an English dictionary, and it keeps them busy for the rest of their life.
Exactly. I love it. That's what you call that. That's the that version is the capital D dictionary, isn't it?
Yeah, well, actually, it's more of a history book than it is a dictionary, because what it does is gives you the history of every word.
Yeah,
and I'm just looking here.
Yeah, this is going to be worth the wait, because I think
I'm not looking. I'm just looking up on just on Google here. I'm just looking here. The action of delaying or postponing something. Yeah, well, that's didn't need the Google to tell me that. It's Latin, and it comes from the verb procrastinare. And let me just check here. I'm just going to put the phone down for a second.
Yeah, this is fascinating. Okay.
It's basically toward tomorrow.
Toward tomorrow.
Toward tomorrow. Yes. Yes. We're moving this. We're moving this to tomorrow. We're moving it toward tomorrow. Yeah. And it says procrastination can take hold in any aspect of life: putting off cleaning the stove, repairing a leaky roof, seeing a doctor or a dentist, submitting a job report or academic assignment, or broaching a stressful issue with a partner. Procrastination can lead to feelings of guilt, inadequacy, depression, and self-doubt. It's really strange that something that's such a powerful
I was just going to say, it's such a negative spin on it.
But such a powerful experience that nobody would have really brought this up, except in, dealing with it as something really, really negative, terrible thing to have happen, and it's very, very strange. It's probably because all the researchers who would look into this procrastinated doing it.
Oh, that's so funny.
And all the philosophers who might have really given us enormous insight said, nah, I don't know if I'm ready to do that or not. Yeah. And I don't know if I want to have any of my competitors know that I actually do this.
Well, I think, and here we are embracing it, turning it into a positive superpower. I was listening at the end of the words that they were using, guilt and shame and all those.
Inadequacy.
Inadequacy. Yeah. I think, it's like we've completely turned that on its tail here. So it's funny that you were saying, thinking back over the 18 months, I was kind of doing the same thing, reflecting on what we've actually sort of, put into action on this. Like, you're going all the way back to, I think, this first idea of recognizing it as a never-ending source of our priorities that's always kept in background for us, always there, ready to access right away. That are our immediate priorities. We don't have to think about that. No to-do list required. It's all there. We know what to draw on from it. And just that tapping into it, that one question of, what have you got for me? And never coming up blank. I ask that question every day. I mean, it's really become ingrained now, and I always have an answer for it.
I mean, it's very interesting. When I first met Babs, and then there was the first trip home to introduce me to her family, and and this was a couple years in, that I knew her, but we were sufficiently committed to each other that Babs just decided to take Dan home to meet Mom. And it was funny because, Babs had kind of told her what I do and what we were doing together. And her mother got her aside and she says, well, don't you worry that he's going to run out of ideas. And Babs said, well, that's actually not really the problem.
He's going to run out of ideas. Oh.
And I've often thought that it's because I've been, I was working on this, in a very unconscious way before I brought it up at lunch that day at La Select. But I've always found that this kind of negative feeling that I was feeling, if I would just go into it, out would pop some new ideas, So people often say, well, where do you get new ideas from? And I honestly feel after the last 18 months that anybody who's willing to go into their feelings of procrastination and kind of, first of all, don't treat it as a bad thing, treat it as a powerful thing, but not a bad thing, that it'll tell them what new thing that they can do, what new new idea.
Mm-hmm.
They can have new decision, new action, new communication, any one of these, and it's ready at any time they want to, because there will always be something that's being held up.
Yes. Yeah, and it's really, I think that the next sort of thing that I realized out of that was almost when it presents itself, when you first start asking yourself that, what have you got for me? The usual presentation of it that you'll get, like the first thought that you get is a noun. We talked about that difference between that the noun is the scary thing. That when you say you got to finish that report, right? The report. That's what I've got for you. But the the freedom is in almost like a second layer of it. So when they say the report comes at you scary and big and dark and intimidating, but the follow-up is, well, what about the report? If you just kind of take that next level as like, well, and then it becomes, well, we got to do this and this and this. And it becomes now much more like, actionable. I think the second layer is where the action is, because what we typically do is it looms over us and we instinctively retract from it. That we instinctively kind of move to the procrastination.
Well, one of the things, just as you were saying that, I was thinking of a series of actions that would make up a completed project. And let's say, all told, there's about 10 of them. There's about 10 actions that you're actually going to have to take. But when we initially procrastinate, we only see the final action. We don't see, and we're kind of blind to all the actions that are actually, and actually the first one is actually more doable than, certainly more doable than the last one. The first action is 1/100th of the difficulty of the final action. If you were trying to pull off the whole action in the first place, the first one is, let's just brainstorm for 10 minutes.
Yes.
Well, that's an easy action. That may be the easiest action of all, is the, I'll just get a sheet of paper and write down everything that comes to mind about this project. No, I'm not producing anything. I'm not showing this to anyone. I'm not accountable for this. I'm just going to let my mind explore the idea for the next 10 minutes. Yeah. And
it's really,
speaking of which, the 10-minute time system has come out of this discussion loud and clear.
Yes. And that's where, this is the thing that a couple of things have come from that. As this idea of the 10 minutes, like certainly how, what I've really come to appreciate is how much time 10 minutes actually is. It's a pretty substantial unit. It's a pretty substantial unit. You can make a lot of headway in 10 minutes. And so that it's perfectly suited to brainstorming, because there's a multiplier on that 10 minutes of brainstorming. And I've been tying this in. I mentioned to you this idea of what I'm lovingly calling now the MOO method, the multiplied oral output method.
Yes.
And that I went through an experience on Monday where I really started thinking to myself, after we had our conversation on Sunday, how much can I actually do with just talking, like without actually, doing anything other than the talking? And I, brainstormed. After I brainstormed and get my outline of what the things are that I wanted to do, I had some, I had a conversation with Stuart, and I had a conversation with Lillian, and I had when I had brainstormed all the things that I was procrastinating, all the things that it had for me, I put the who beside the item, and I had one list for Lillian, and I just in one, we maybe talked for, maybe it was 20 minutes, but it was like me completely just distilling my desire, what I wanted for the outcomes, just describing it to her in that one phone call. And then I did the same thing with Stuart, and maybe we probably talked for 40 minutes, but it was like there were some pretty detailed things that I just bypassed my go off alone and think about it. I just did that real thinking right there in real time with someone. And it was just such a productive hour. It was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So compare that to how pre-Joy of Procrastination, how you might have experienced the items that got discussed, and I kind of feel got passed on to Lillian and Stuart. So talk to me, early June 2016. What would that?
I mean, that's probably even the third generation of it. Even then, like I think that the initial realization, I'm kind of seeing how we layered these on top of each other. The idea of the brainstorming. I wasn't thinking in terms of 10 minutes then, because it was. I was just thinking about the brainstorming, but not really putting a timeline on it like this. And so I would do the brainstorm, but then I would always I would feel like I had to do a little more on my own of it, before I would pass it on to somebody like.
Yeah, because this was pre-who, the distinction between who and how, too.
Yeah.
So you would have brainstormed, but they were possibly brainstorming a whole series of things that were how things that you would then have to attend to.
Yeah. And it would be, I certainly would do more of it, and there would be a little bit more involved in my role of it. But as we've been talking, getting to the point now where I, fully embrace being able to, pass this to collaborate with the right who. And it's kind of really my output now is it's phenomenally better. I've just got a third writer now that I'm working with. I'm realizing now that the multiple of, an hour of oral output is it's a full day basically. There's probably 8 hours of processing that could be done with an hour of
talking.
Yes,
absolutely. Mooing. You were just mooing.
I was just mooing.
Mooing.
So now it's I've really, this has been coming up here in December now. This is the first full year of deploying this method without, before I named it the Moo method, of doing my More Cheese, Less Whiskers podcast and having a writer go in and take the transcript of it and find the nuggets in there and write 2 300 to 500 word articles from each episode, so that I can now send 3 emails a week to my list and it's all derived from me talking for 1 hour, and it's and that becomes a real driver. So I've just launched a new podcast for my real estate agents called Listing Agent Lifestyle, and it's and now I have another writer doing that exact same thing for this podcast.
Yeah,
it's really like I'm starting to see this. I think that as soon as it's not just about speaking too. There's something really different that happens when you talk, when you have a conversation and you record that conversation. All of a sudden, you've captured it and turned it into a now digital asset. Because from that, if you don't record it, you've just spilled it into the ether there, right? You haven't captured it. There's zero leverage in it. But when you capture the audio, when you capture you've got the digital audio file, which you can use. I had a really neat thing where I was talking with Chuck Charlton, one of our realtors who I had on my Listing Agent Lifestyle podcast, and we were talking about this video that I had sent him a couple of years ago. It showed these guys riding their boat down this canal and shining a light at night, and the fish just jumping in the boat. And I had used that to describe. I used that to describe the way that our Getting Listings program works, right? That you just shine the light and the people call you to come and list their house. And so we were talking about that. And one of the items I mentioned on Monday that I had a conversation with Stuart, that was on my mind. I thought, you know what would be really great is if we find that video clip and then overlay the audio of Chuck and I describing that and him describing the way that his listing getting system works, and make that as a video that we can use to promote the episode of that podcast. So that was all. I said that, and then that set off this chain of events that we found it, and then I have the video with exactly the way I described it, and so, but we wouldn't have that if I didn't record that conversation. So you really see all the different uses, like when you from the raw material of spoken word conversations captured and recorded turns into, you've got the audio that you can slice up, you've got the transcript that you can do, fully, or you can do, turn parts of it into articles. You can take excerpts from that and turn it into a book. Right now I've got this year we'll have a More Cheese, Less Whiskers book that is all of the articles, the 104 articles that we wrote from the podcast, compiled into a book. Right. And that's kind of, so that's going to be a neat thing, just all these derivative things that you can get from that.
I'm thinking an image of you at sort of just prior to your 6th birthday, which would have qualified you to go off to school and be abused.
Yes.
By teachers. Okay.
Yes.
By teachers. Okay. So I'm thinking the same thing because I was a wanderer before, and I was a talker too. I mainly spent my time talking to adults because there were no children my age when I was growing up. So it wasn't until 1st grade that I actually hung out with kids who were my own age. So one way we can look at what we've been through over the last 18 months is that we've both de-schooled ourselves.
Yes.
And what I mean is that we've gone back to what worked prior to going into 1st grade. I didn't go to kindergarten, so I don't know if you did, but I didn't go to...
I did, yeah.
You went to kindergarten too?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, but that's mostly play.
It's mostly play. You're right. Yes.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of organized play, more organized than you would play on your own. But it wasn't the heavy fitting you into the mold process that started happening in 1st grade. So just think about you already having probably the skills that you now have now, but in an early stage and not conscious because we're not really all that conscious for it yet, but we had the ability, and I did too, before that. And then what does the schooling do? The schooling house you. It house you. I mean, I'm turning how into a verb. It house you. In other words, whatever instinct you had toward hooing, they get you away from hooing and put you into howling, and they
howling and doing. Yes,
they run you through. 12 years, and then if you go on to higher education beyond grade school and high school, and then there's another 4. It might be 6 years and everything else. But it's all about howling. You're isolated. You're told you can't talk to you have to do your study on your own. You have to do your papers on your own. You have to do your tests on your own. And it's all howling. It's all howling.
Yes. And that's you think about.
But we had both figured out hooing even before we went to school.
It's true. I mean, that's I guess. Yeah, well, you really all that memory, and of course the things that we learned then. I mean, are completely, like the ability to all the remembering of things that you're required to do, all that rote repetition. Wow.
But you remembered things before you went to school. I remembered things.
Did.
I remembered stories. I remembered, I remembered people's stories and, and everything like that. So I had a terrific memory for other people's experiences that came from hooing. It was, talking to people, saying, gee.
Yes.
Wow, what was it like to live on a farm before there was electricity? That could be an hour's description,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting that we were probably at the last gasping stages of howling in the world, in other words, because now that we've gone digital, that's kind of like an encumbrance. The howling people in the digital world are the ones who don't make much money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you look at the one thing I remember midway through my kindergarten year was my introduction to the concept of 1972. That it's not 1971 anymore. It's 1972 now. Mm-hmm. I was in kindergarten for a little while, and then we took some time off for Christmas, and then I came back, and all of a sudden Now there's this whole new, now it's 1972. And that was an interesting, my intro, because before that you had no sense of that, even that there's time, like that this is the passing of this, right?
Yeah.
I just remember, it's funny how I remember, like, I'm seeing the visual right now of seeing on the board, on the blackboard, this that to me was like an awakening, that there was something, that this was 1972, this sense of space, time and that seemed pretty important at the time. Funny.
Yeah. Well, it is. It was very interesting. Shannon Waller, who's been the longest with us of our team members, so she's in her 27th year now as strategic coach. But she had her oldest daughter, who is now just going off to college. When they taught her sign language, there's a whole school where they can show parents how to teach their children sign language, because they have words in their brain before they can actually speak, and they find that kids who learn how to sign when they're about the year before they actually start talking, they become much more verbally proficient if they develop sign language. And she knew about 40, 50 signs, and they could communicate with each other. And I learned about 10 of them, and I could communicate with her. But it was really, really interesting. There was a day when she couldn't actually say words, and then there was the next day when she started saying her first words. In the day before, she had told a story through sign language where it involved, she was remembering something from a previous day, and there's a sign for the previous day, and it was seeing a bird in the park, and she was telling the story. And they say that when they start telling stories where they're using time, almost immediately they're on the threshold of talking. They're on the threshold of talking. So somehow time consciousness has come in, and there was a distinction in her mind between the day she was actually in and the day before. But she was telling the story from the day before right now. And they say when the child's brain has that ability to shift in time, they're right on the threshold of talking, because it's such a powerful discovery that they have to talk. That they're starting to get the urgency to talk. I was just struck by that, because that 1971, it's a very powerful thing, when we grasp time, or the units of time, minutes. And
when you think about it, it really is like, we do spend the preschool years expressing ourselves, through talking and expressing our wants, our needs, our desires, getting things done through other people. And then we immediately step into this assembly line.
What's interesting is that I didn't talk till I was 2.5, which is very late. And my mother was taking me to the doctor for a checkup, and he said, well, he's really quiet. And she said, what do you mean? She says, well, he doesn't talk. He doesn't talk very much. No, she said, he hasn't started talking. And the doctor says, how old is he? And he says, well, 2.5. And she says, oh. The doctor more or less said there must be something wrong with him. Okay.
Wow.
And, because it's late. It's late. I mean, she has no words at all. Not a word at all. And he says, well, how does he get what he wants? And he says he just sort of points. He points to the person, and he points to the thing. And,
we're on to something here. 72.5 years later. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I've
We've
just
finally come full circle.
I've come full circle back to the original skill. You just point to the person, point to the thing, and no wasted words.
Oh, that's so funny, Dan.
Yeah, but then she said one night at dinner, I started talking, and I had vocabulary, I had syntax, I had grammar, and everything. And she said I was off to the races. And this is a learning pattern of mine. I don't learn. I don't seem to be learning. I don't seem to be learning. I don't seem to be learning. And then one day, it looks like I've learned it. And so, I'm sort of sensing this right now this year. This has been the most remarkable year of increased productivity of my entire life. And from the conversation, you're experiencing the same thing.
Yeah. Well, so I wonder what. That's why it's important, I think, to.
We weren't learning. We weren't learning. And then in 2016, 2017, we learned. Yeah.
And I think it's worth noting what the actual, the practical things that I do now that I wasn't doing that just now seem so natural. Like certainly that daily question of what have you got for me? Like really acknowledging the procrastination, the going beyond the noun of it, the finished, intimidating big presentation of what it comes up with, and identifying, okay, so what about that? And then the brainstorming of it and adopting now the
10-minute frameworks.
10-minute frameworks for that, which automatically, starting with this idea of 100 of them as an abundance of units is fantastic. Have you been counting your units as you go? Maintain.
Well,
I haven't started that yet.
I did it for 3 or 4 weeks, and then I lost the value of documenting them because I've acquired the habit of just asking the 3 questions. Is it worth 10 minutes? Can I do it in 10 minutes? And kind of let's see how much I can get done in 10 minutes. And I find that any time during the day when I think of something, I'll think, is this worth 10 minutes of my time? The answer is yes. Okay. Can you get it done in 10 minutes? I said, well, I can get something very important done in 10 minutes. I said, okay, let's do it. And here's the interesting thing. I start a brand new workshop tomorrow. The quarter starts tomorrow. And usually the 30 days before a new workshop is kind of angsty for me, especially the last 10 days or so before it starts. And the reason is that looking back, I put off a lot of things that were necessary to put in the hands of other people, and it created a tension in me that I wasn't doing those things, but it was also creating a tension in my mind that I was going to jam people at the last moment with these things. And everything was finished for me on Thursday, which isn't late because there's a day and a half of production time when things have to be printed and bound and put into binders and everything else. And I know a day and a half doesn't jam them. If I do it at Friday at noon, it really jams them. They might have to do weekend work. But the major brand new things that I needed were done 3 weeks ago and put into production. And everything, all the new stuff was completely finished 2 weeks ago. And I was trying to figure out, and what it was that I got an idea for an exercise, and I just sat down and I said, let's just sketch it out. Let's take 10 minutes and just sketch it out. And lo and behold, the whole thing was completely sketched out in 10 minutes, walked back to the artist, walked her through it, and had the finished artwork back within about an hour. And then all I had to do was write in the sample copy, But what I was doing, Dean, is that I was just saying, well, I could probably knock that off in 10 minutes. And I did 3 brand new exercises if I add up all the time of the 3 new design exercises on my part before they went into the hands of the artist, it was less than 6 Jackson units.
Wow. That's so great. And that, that ties in kind of with something that I've been doing in the last, I'd say real consciously in the last 60 or 90 days. I've really started asking myself this, what would I like to do tomorrow? And really seeing what you can do today to set up something for tomorrow, like thinking ahead, because we're primarily, when you really get down to it, we've discussed the idea that there's really only 2 time frames. There's right now and not now. And that, and when you get a sense of, I mean, that's really the only times we actually can embrace, or can understand. And if it's the only not,
2 parts. The only 2 parts of life is just right now and then other thoughts.
Yes, exactly. And but thinking through, like thinking ahead, and that's almost what I was thinking about it, that it's almost like what an experience transformer is after the fact. To think about it ahead of the fact,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're relying on experience. I mean, and the thing about this, I mean, that thing that you just said is so crucial, and I think it's almost worth, future podcasts on it. That there's only 2 time dimensions. There's right now and not now, and if you look where where I have been unhappy in the past, I'll talk about myself in the past, is where anytime I wasn't in right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense, and that's where I was either back there or I was up there. In other words, I was looking back or I was looking forward, but neither of those places is right now. And they're not accessible to you. I mean, there's nothing you can do about back then, from an action standpoint. And in truth, there's not much you can do. There's not really much you can do in the future from an action standpoint. Right. That's exactly right. That's where when I look at those, whenever I get those feelings of like, that the overwhelm where you've got all of these things, like you feel pressing. And I have to say, I very rarely get to that point now. I think even, I think about it now, how just natural it is that we're fully acknowledging the procrastination early on and embracing it, that it's really I think there's that real sense of being more current, I guess, or up to.
Well, it is, and I've been, I read I'm a big internet surfer, and I'm doing this. And one of the things that I really am sensitive right now is where people are making predictions about bad things in the future, And I was saying, boy, there's a person who's trapped. I'm not even paying any attention to what the person is predicting. I'm just taking a look at how the predictor must be experiencing life, that they're taken up with this bad thing that's in the not now time zone. They're and whether it's related to the climate or it's related to artificial intelligence or it's related to energy or anything. There's just all these bad things that are being talked about. This is what's going to happen and everything else. And I'm just sitting there how this person probably doesn't spend much time in the right now.
Right. Yeah. And it's, that really, I think that those kind of thoughts, it really do rob us of the right now.
Well, we have no capability in the not now. We only have capability in right now. We have lots of capability as much as we want to develop in the right now, but it's not up there and it's not back there.
That's true. That's true.
And I think that being confronted with something scary where you feel you have no capability must be terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, wondering, I was just thinking about this whole, the times that I have been, caught up in that. It's always there's always something that we're doing in, when we are actively or in the negative way in the past, procrastinating. It's to avoid that thought of facing what's coming in the future. And we always are doing something.
Yeah, but there's the thing is that if you've got a lot of right now available and you're not using it, because you're preoccupied with something in the future or something in the past, that's where that sense of waste comes from, I think. Waste is that, look, you got to right now. Next 10 minutes you could turn the corner on you're thinking about this project, but you're seeing the right now as insignificant and compared with something you're frightened of that you're imagining in the future. So there's this sense I can't actually use what I have available to me. That's a tremendous frustration,
Yeah. I've found those 10 minutes of thinking in the now really can make a big difference. Where I live right now, in Florida, everything, basically everywhere that I go in Winter Haven is approximately 10 minutes away. I'm about 10 or 11 minutes to Starbucks. And then I'm about 10 or 11 minutes from Starbucks to my office and 10 minutes from my office to my home. So in any given day, there may be as many as 5 or 6 opportunities that I'm driving for 10 minutes at a time. And I've taken to, for most of those things now, instead of listening to the radio or listening to a podcast, I've taken to probably 50% of those units just thinking. And it's amazing how much clarity I can get about, this is sometimes I'll ask myself that, what have you got for me today? Clarity on my way to Starbucks. And by the time I get to Starbucks, I'll then pull out my notepad and go through my what have you got for me today is very then much more organized because I've been thinking about it for the 10 minutes to get there rather than starting it then. And it's there's something about that. Just
well, I think
thinking.
if you look at it kind of like a muscle, like a physical muscle, by doing that, you make your capability of using those 10 minutes better. Each time you do it. It's very interesting. I went to see my physiologist at Canyon Ranch about a month ago, a month, maybe a little bit more. And he was saying, one of the big things you don't want to lose as you get older is balance. And he said there's this neat thing that you can do that he said will increase your balance significantly. And that is, and he says, takes about a minute, but you just put, you got bare feet, you put your feet out in front of you, and he says, just open your toes as much as you can and take each of the toes to that side. So you got them upright, and you take your right foot to the right-hand side and the left foot to the left-hand side. And he says, do that 10 times. And then he says, just stick your feet out as far as you can and pull them up as far as you can. Do that 10 times. And then put your feet out and put them to the inside, sort of turn them to the inside and do that 10 minutes. He said, it takes about, 1 second or 2 seconds each time you do it. But he said, if you do that for 6 months, your balance will be twice as good as it is right now. That's all you have to do. You don't have to do anything else. Do it once a day. And he says the nerves will get used to it, and the nerves will inform the muscles, and the muscles will increase the balance. And he said that's all you have to do to get better.
Wow. So give me the protocol.
Well, there's three exercises, okay? In one of them, your feet are upright. You always start with you're sticking them out as far as you can. You got your toes in the air. And then the first exercise is to take each foot and move it to that side as far as you can, and then back upright. And you rotate 10 times. Then the next one is where they're upright, and now you stay in the same line, and you push your feet your toes as far as they can go forward, and then pull them back as far as you can, all in the same line. Okay. And then the next one, you have your feet to the, you spread your feet a little bit. Now you push your toes to the inside, so they're pointing towards each other, back and forth. And you do each of the exercise 10 times. So I've been doing it for about a month now, and I just noticed that I'm much more stable. There's much more spring in my foot.
More hitch. Yeah.
But he says you're just waking all the nerves up that have gone to sleep because you've been wearing shoes all your life. He said your feet just get very, very lazy because you don't have to really use them because you're used to wearing shoes and you depend upon the shoes to do the balance. But he said that after a while, he says you're unsteady on your feet because they've kind of lost, the nerves have kind of gone to sleep. He said, all you'll do is just wake up the nerves. So my feeling is that we're waking up the present in all this exercise. We're waking up what's possible in the present there. It's like we're saying, geez, 10 minutes, that's an incredible amount of time. Well, most people think 10 minutes is a throwaway.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's been an eye-opener for me. And there's something about that silence, too. Like, it's funny how our brains seek to be engaged, right? Like, I noticed that we're always paying attention to something. Yeah. And I think that attention wants to be engaged in something. And it's that attention that shirks or shies away from the big intimidating thing of, confronting this big noun of a project.
The final house.
Immediately, that it's much easier to watch this one more cat video on YouTube or read this one more article, or that's much That's much more easy. And so when we direct that attention to this thing by tricking it with, let's just spend 10 minutes and brainstorm this right now. And then it comes along for the ride. And it's really, I think that's what's so valuable about conversation, is that you're fully engaged in a conversation. You have a conversation that has your full attention.
Yeah, and you're matching up your thoughts with the thoughts of another person. You're actually, it's a very creative act because it's unpredictable. And so you got to have your wits at at a high level, and saying, oh, what did Dean just say? Oh, yeah. And so you kind of want to communicate that you got what the other person said, and then you say something in response that shows that you kind of understood what the other person said. In other words, you brought your own thought and you kind of lined it up with the thought of the other person. But I was just thinking about the scary projects, from the earliest childhood. I can remember is don't look directly at the sun,
Don't look directly at the project. Yeah.
Don't look directly at the project. It'll blind you, It'll blind you. And the thing is, we're masters of shadows. When you think about how we make if we've spent our life not looking at the sun, what have we looked at? We've looked at the shadows, and we're the masters of a million different kinds of shadows, and we call that reality, But I remember when the solstice was there, and I didn't, I didn't, pay much attention to it, but I noticed I was in a town in Cape Cod where they had the solstice, and people were looking up at their sunglasses, and I said, don't look at the sun, don't. I went right back to childhood training. I said, I'm going to get through this day, and I'm still going to be able to see. Some of these people aren't because they look at the sun. I said, I will not have missed anything. I said, I will, but it's very, very interesting that metaphor, of not looking at the sun. Don't look at things that you can't take action on, because it'll demoralize you.
Yes. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
So,
anyway,
what are we going to focus on? I know exactly.
How did we get to where we are today? How did this? It'd be interesting to reverse engineer that, and the twists and turns of the conversation. But we both are in agreement, if I would sum up, that there's been a profound change in our personal productivity since we started this series.
I agree with that 100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what's the interesting thing is it's been such a subtle and evolving process that it's almost like when we're looking back on our progress there, so that we can see the evolution of it, see what led to what. But it's completely different for me now than it was when we first started, for sure.
There's a topic that occurred to me because I was just writing a few things down before we got on the phone, and that is that I've become very good-natured about other people's procrastinations.
And why is that? Just because you recognize what's going on and how easy it is to overcome it.
I kind of comprehend what's happening to them, and and I'll say, you kind of, people are not moving forward on a project. I said, "Are you finding this a bit scary? Are you feeling jammed about this?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, let's just talk about it for a few minutes." And I said, let's just talk about it a few minutes. And I said, so let's not talk about what you can't do. Let's actually zero in on some things that you can do right now, and within 4 or 5 minutes, I'll get them started, and they feel untrapped, and they'll move forward. And I think the reason is because I'm not looking at myself negatively because I'm procrastinating. I'm also then shifting that to how I treat other people. I'm not looking at what they're doing as negative, but I know they're kind of stuck. And if I can just talk to them about it, they get unstuck. So,
wow,
more useful.
Dan, as you were talking about that, I almost had this vision of an app button that somebody could push and be connected to an impact filterer on demand.
Yeah, well, I did a whole impact filter on this project, how to get it started with Ari Meisel, and it's in the breakthrough booklet this time. So,
oh wow,
and I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you because I'm sending it out to everybody that it concerns. It goes into action tomorrow. So I'll send you the impact filter on this. It's in the breakthrough booklet. Yeah.
Oh, that's so great.
No, I took it seriously.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to see you in less than 2 weeks now. Not this Thursday, next Thursday.
Thursday of the week after next.
Yes.
Or Thursday of next week, not this coming week, but
that's right.
Thursday of and the Saturday.
That's right.
The Thursday.
That's right.
Saturday.
Yes.
Yes.
And then are we recording?
I think we're on for next Sunday. I think we're on.
Perfect.
Yeah,
good.
I think we are. Yeah, good.
Have a great week.
All right.